And so, talking about the children of Israel came into Egypt, and certainly we remember why they were down there, the famine, and then we see where conditions are beginning to change. They're going to change after Joseph dies, and we're going to see where when Exodus opens up, its conditions are radically different, if you will. And the thing is, we don't know how long that happened, what kind of period of time that it happened, but God was with them. And in verse 7 right there of Exodus 1:7, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. And so basically, God was taking care of his people. And I think last time, one thing that you wonder, how could God allow them to go into slavery? And I think we talked about that, obviously to become a distinct nation. But I think there should have been some other things that should have helped shape them, if you will. And but we're going to see where, well, it didn't have the effect that it should have, I don't think. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. And so he's got that kind of noticeable there, wisely. And the same term in Acts 17:18, and that's where Stephen, he's making his defense before the Sanhedrin, and he's recounting Israel's history in Acts chapter 7. And until there arose in Egypt a king who did not know Joseph, he dealt shrewdly with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants so they would not be kept alive. I don't know what yours says. Mine in Acts, I got the New King James, and it says treacherously. He dealt treacherously. Yes?
I was just going to point it out. I've seen translations that deal harshly. Mm-hmm.
Basically, not good. So in anything, I guess you see wisely and you think, well, that doesn't sound too bad, But when you shrewdly, then okay, now we're starting to and then harshly or treacherously, that's when you start getting craftily, and he tricked our ancestors and was cruel to them. And so, looking at it, what I find interesting, he didn't try to expel them from the land. He just, we're gonna make it hard on them. And as we get into that, I want you to kind of think about that. What was really behind that? So we're not getting rid of them. What are we going to do with them? And control the mob. Control and rob the masses with fraud. And so what we're going to see is where he is going to come up with a plan, if you will, and this is how we're going to control the people. And so the question gets asked, who was this new and cruel king of Egypt? And there's, just like on that slide that had the 400 years, in the back of the book here, I don't know if y'all have had a chance to look at it or if you should, it talks about when was the time of the Exodus. And there's people who debate, there's a later date that's given and an earlier date, and you've got the archaeologists and folks like that who try to make a case for this, and then people who know the Bible like, whoa, if you do that, then that doesn't fit here. And so basically, and I'll go ahead and throw this out as a disclaimer for as you look into it, God did not give us any of the names, any personal names of the pharaohs. So, and he didn't give us anything to really connect and go, okay, I know exactly when this happened. Because why do we really need to know? I mean, I think certain people will get into that, and I think I'm going to touch on that just a little bit, because you may run across people who, well, when do you think it happened, or this or that? And really what it comes down to, I think like Bob makes the thing, that it doesn't affect our faith. You mean I gotta know exactly when God did this, and if I don't know exactly when, you don't need to know. It happened a long time ago, and so basically, that's what I wanted to say. We'll touch on it. I won't get too deeply into it because actually, and I think in the slides we're actually going to touch on some of that. I think we all have curiosity. Let me not dismiss that. You'd like to know. There's things you want. I want to like to know this. Yes.
This was a process that took place over 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of pharaohs during that time. The period of the New Testament, when we start reading about the New Testament from the beginning to the end, how many emperors were there in Rome at that time, just during that 100 years?
Oh yeah.
We're talking about 400 years. It doesn't matter. This thing happened over a period of time. The only thing we need to know is that they went into Egypt, revered, and welcomed, and by the time that 400 years was up, they were slaves, and God chose to take them out of Egypt. And when they left Egypt, the Egyptians were ready for them to go.
Exactly. And God knew exactly what was going to happen, and his plan was right on schedule. Now the Egyptians did not leave detailed records, and they were usually good about having detailed records, and because of that part of the world, the humidity is very low, and it's conducive to preserve things and everything like that. So why wouldn't the Egyptians, going back and looking at this period of time, why wouldn't they have kept detailed records, do you think?
There's a lot of bad stuff happening to them. They didn't want to remember that.
Right, and that's usually how we think too. You think back on something, and for some reason, if you go through a bad time and then you come out of that and you look back and you think, you seem to find the positives. Now you might remember, I had it really bad, but it's kind of like you don't really want to dwell on the negative too much. You might I had this challenge and I got over it, but you don't really want to dwell on the pain and the things that you really went through. And so it's normal that they wouldn't want to have this history out there. So we had this was a bad time for us. And so here's a statue of Ramesses II from Thebes, Egypt. And I think people point to the 19th dynasty, and that's the later date, about 1250. You'll see various ones. It'll be somewhere, they don't know exactly, but they'll pull something like this, and they'll go with that. So in the British Museum in London. And then we see, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramesses. And let me go ahead and get this. Does this prove that the Exodus story did not take place in the 19th century in Egypt? And because it's talking about Ramesses and Ramesses II. And so when you look at that, and I'm going to turn to this in a minute because we're going to get to a slide we're going to kind of touch on that. But again, to me, this is not the essence of, I have to know all the nuts and bolts and where they fit and how they did. Genesis 47:11, and Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them the possession of the land of Egypt and the best of the land and the land of Ramesses as Pharaoh had commanded, the 10th dynasty. Again, some people want to say that Ramesses, that he, we can go back and we can find from records, this is the guy. There have been, I'm sure, other people that have had that same name, if you will, and as Alan pointed out, there's been a succession of people, and you can run across that name before. The name Ramesses means Ra, created it/him, thus not necessarily traced to the kings of the 19th century. And when you think of that, who was Ra? The sun god? Yeah, I think so. I think Ra was the sun god. He was the chief god of all the other gods, if you will. And then here's the thing of their various Egyptian gods. So they were religious. You know, the Egyptians were very religious. There were many gods in Egyptian religion, but for many centuries the chief god was Ra. Therefore, Egypt as a whole would be considered the land of Ra. And why would the sun god have so much prominence, do you think, in Egypt? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's probably the thing you notice the most. You know, yeah, it's there, and it gets your attention. If Ramesses II is not the best fit chronologically to be the Pharaoh of Exodus 1, who is? And this is what I'm talking about here. I wanted to read, turn back here. I wanted to read a little excerpt that to me makes it easier to understand. But let me go ahead and we'll read this first. And then only two principal views exist. Like I said, the 1441 or the 1290 in the reign of Ramesses II, or the second. Ramesses II. The early view is the biblical one. It is quite clear from a careful survey of all scripture evidence, including the whole time scheme underlying the Pentateuch and the early history of Israel through the history of the Judges, the time of Solomon, and the Old Testament places Moses in the period of Exodus around the middle of the 15th century BC. And I'll go ahead and read this too. And so you see different passages like 1 Kings 6:1 that do give you glimpses of, you know, certain of times, and you try to fit that together. And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the second month that began to build that he began to build the house of the Lord. If we accept the 1441 date, this would make Solomon's 4th year as 961 BC. If we accept the late date, we must either date Solomon to near the time of Isaiah or reject the accuracy of 1 Kings 6:1. And so I think that's exactly what, you know, like I say, there's people that, you know, I guess this is a big deal for them. And so, well, let me hold this till we get right into the this next slide here. This Thutmose the Third, 1450 BC, and this Unger that is quoted here. Let's see. Unger makes a good argument that the Egyptian Pharaoh Amenhotep II was the Pharaoh of Exodus. His father Thutmose, I guess that's how you pronounce that, Thutmose the Third, was a famous conqueror and empire builder. He would have been the Pharaoh of the oppression, and I have no reason to contradict that. And it probably makes the most sense. And so if this Amenhotep II was the Pharaoh of Exodus, then his firstborn son was slain in the last plague. Interestingly, contrary to normal practice, the eldest son of Amenhotep II did not follow him upon the throne. And so that would make perfect sense that he was killed, you know, in the plague. So normally his eldest son would be the one who would ascend to the throne. And so here's something here about Thutmose, basically along the lines of what I read. Tremendously successful warrior, pharaoh, and conqueror, ruled 1482 to 1450 BC, conquered Palestine, Syria to the east, conquered more of Nubia in the south. Now Egypt was a true empire, brought Egypt to the height of its military power. So when the oppression was going on, and you know, you see, you understand why God, if this happened to be the one, and again, you know, like I say, I don't think it really, it matters if it really was him or not, because by faith, we know that they did go through what they went through, and whether this is the one who brought about that or not, doesn't change that. And it says when he died in 1450, he was entombed in the Valley of the Tombs of the kings of Western Thebes. And so you see a map there, and that's what I guess the Valley of the Tombs. And Thutmose the third mummy was discovered in 1881 along with several other 18th and 19th century dynasty leaders. Overall, his mummy was not in good shape, damaged by tomb robbers. The face, however, was remarkably preserved, and we're going to get to see we'll get to see that in a moment. But I guess this is what it looked like on the inside of some of these tombs, if you will, how they had it. And you've probably seen some of those shows where someone like a pharaoh would die and he'd be like in a pyramid, and they've gone in there and they have all kinds of different things in there, and like, wow, why do they have all these different things? And I guess that's what he would have looked like. But this is, I guess y'all are seeing that there. Are y'all seeing the picture of his face? Yeah. Okay, and I want to ask y'all this question. Why did the Egyptians embalm their dead? Why do y'all think? You ever thought about that? Exactly. They felt like you had to, I think, and they turned them into mummies, mummification. And I think one of the things how they discovered this, when in the sand, people, I guess, died, and I guess some got put under the sand, but the sand actually extracted the moisture from their body in a certain way, and then the heat, it preserved them. And so they started learning about how to embalm, and I guess they took that and they built on that, because if you take them out of the sand and you put them in a tomb, then the decay begins again. So they had to do certain things. And in Genesis chapter 50, I thought this was interesting. We probably remember reading this. And this is talking about after Jacob dies. Then Joseph, this is chapter 50 of Genesis. Then Joseph fell on his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for him, for such are the days required for those who are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. And then if you drop to the very last verse of chapter 50, so Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So, that's how they did it. Not to say that, but Donna's exactly right. Their religious concept was, if you're going to be a part of the afterlife, your body has to be preserved to some degree. And so that was part of their religion, and they obviously perfected it, because people didn't turn to dust. So, but they basically mummies and what was it? Tutankhamun? Yeah, they found him, and they actually, there was a thing where he went around to different cities and stuff, and so yeah.
They even wrote songs about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the Egyptians were very, for their day, very intelligent, very capable, and in various ways they advanced. But obviously, religiously, no.
If you go to the British Museum, there are so many mummies.
Oh, really?
It's just almost like, you just go in certain parts, and they're just literally stacked.
Do you get to see flesh, or are they all wrapped up?
Some of them are, some aren't.
Do they look like that guy?
That it's not uncommon.
But did they look like that guy? Kind of a green, kind of like they're
But
okay.
it's just not uncommon for them to have found. I mean, it was just almost like, well, here's another mummy.
Yeah. But the fact that they're still intact is amazing. Thousands of years later, they're still intact. Like, wow. Therefore, they set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, and all their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So what were the Egyptians doing here? What was the point of all this? Yes. Huh?
Trying to work them to death.
Pretty much, yeah.
And to humiliate them.
Yeah.
Slow down procreation for one thing.
Exactly.
By working them that hard that they wouldn't have time to have children. Well, they found some time.
And what was an added benefit that they probably realized too? Exactly. Yeah. They're having these cities built. They're having this done. Yeah, we don't want to turn these people loose. We want them to stay here. Now, we want to control them. We want to control the numbers, and we want to make sure. But
Exactly what, looking ahead, when Pharaoh does let them go, that's exactly what came to, and later was holding. All of our workforce is gone.
Exactly. I'm sure they've become accustomed to having them there, and they are like part of the infrastructure to make sure, hey, we want to build stuff, and I'm sure they waited on them and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, you can see there's a natural connection there that he doesn't want to sever. He doesn't want to, no, we're not going to put these people out. Now, we do want to control the male children, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But that rigor, that severe kind of just very harsh, working them, like as Purdy said, work them to death. Taskmaster, huh?
We don't know anything about the hours that they work. Probably daylight from dark,
I would imagine when the sun's starting to come up, you need to be where you're supposed to be. When the sun starts going down, okay. I mean, I don't know, but that sounds the most. If you're going to work somebody and you're really going to really put them to it, therefore, so the taskmasters literally burden captains, gang masters, overseers of labor gangs. The word was being used in the technical term for a body of men employed on forced labor. Rigor, unused root meaning to break apart, fracture. That is severely, and so or severity. I'm sorry, severity. I'm wearing my glasses, and I don't know if I should take them off or leave them on, because I see better kind of up close. But we'll go on. All right, but basically the bottom line is they are trying to work them to death, and there's hieroglyphics, Hebrews making mud bricks. And so you see, that definitely went on. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah. And the other was Puah. The name of the other was Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. All right, and one of the things I wanted to read out of Bob's material here, well, no, I think it's actually on the screen. I'm going to go with this, yeah. I'll read something out here in just a minute. The midwives named in 115, who are not Egyptian but Hebrew women, were no doubt the heads of the whole profession and were expected to communicate their instructions to their associates. Obviously, if the number of the Israelites was even remotely approached 600,000 males in Exodus 12:37, far more than 2 midwives would have been required. And that makes perfect sense. You read about them, but you realize they couldn't have handled all of that. And Shiphrah and Puah, who were here mentioned, were probably certain chiefs under whom all the rest acted and by whom they were instructed to the obstetric art, or in the obstetric art. With respect to the, well, have you got that? There we go, yeah. With respect to the objection sometimes raised that no Egyptian monarch would possibly have commanded such wholesale cold-blooded destruction of poor, innocent, harmless children, it is to be observed first that the Egyptian monarchs had very little regard indeed for the lives of any persons who were not of their own nation. They constantly massacred prisoners taken in war. They put to death or enslaved persons cast upon their coast. They cemented with the blood of their captives each stone of their edifices. The sacredness of human life was not a principle with them. That tender and compassionate regard for children, which seems to us Englishmen of the present day a universal instinct, is in the truth of the fruit of Christianity and was almost unknown in the ancient world. Children who were not wanted were constantly exposed to be devoured by wild beasts or otherwise made away with, and with such expedition was defended by philosophers in Syria and Carthage. They were constantly offered to idols at Rome unless the father imposed to say that every child was killed. It would probably not have cost an Egyptian pharaoh a single pang to condemn to death a number of children any more than an animal, and I think that's actually correct. The thing I want to ask y'all is, why kill just the boys and not the girls? That's exactly right. Why kill the boys and not the girls? Pharaoh would not have wanted to stop all growth of his slaves, but he did not want the boys growing into men who could be soldiers, who might join an enemy to fight against Egypt. There is no way to know how many babies died or how long the ruling stayed in place. Well, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but that's where he's going to take it to the next level, if you will. And you see where, obviously we're familiar with this, the abortion, and I'll go back here, places like China and India, just saying that's something that so many people don't have a problem with. And then if you can access the prenatal gender, then again, they take it to another level, and it's just, it's evil. But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come into them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. So because of what they did, and I'm sure, I was thinking about that, and I thought, I'm sure they probably passed the word, if you're having a baby, hurry and have it. Go ahead and, we really don't want to be there. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast in the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. And so, seeing that's when we definitely realize that he was cold-blooded, and he his thing was he didn't want to stop all people, but he did want to stop the male children. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and he took a wife, the daughter of Levi, and so we know that's Amram and Jochebed, and the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months, and when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. I think yours might say asphalt, but whatever it was something that was going to make it waterproof, obviously. And put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And so basically, there, in the picture, you got the child in there, and it's like a floating basket, if you will. And we get to see the providence of God here, where, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. There is nothing improbable in the Egyptian princess bathing in the Nile at a place reserved for women. The Nile was regarded as sacred and its water health-giving. So, yeah, this isn't something, something made up. This is something that very easily could have happened, because I imagine there might be some people like, yeah, right, they just go out. Yeah, they would. By the Nile, however, does not necessarily mean that Pharaoh's daughter bathed publicly in the river. There may have been private bathhouses beside the river into one of which she went. The real lesson here is the providence of God. The time, place, people all come together to accomplish His will. No one forced to act against His will. And I wanted to read something here that I find interesting. I don't know if this is true or not, and even Bob says this. An interesting Jewish tradition, and I guess this is something that they recount, I guess, says that Pharaoh's daughter had one of her handmaids who had a baby to try and feed the infant. He would not have it, so Miriam chose that moment to come up and ask if the princess would like for her to fetch a Hebrew woman to nurse the child. The story is feasible and would fit into the situation, but there's no way of knowing if it's true. Don't know. If it happened, you can see the providence of God. Yeah, that's and the name of Pharaoh's daughter is never given, nor is the personal name of the Pharaoh ever given in the story. And so we're going to see where Moses, he's going to, and go ahead, I'll go ahead and read this. Then he said to his sister, the Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse of the Hebrew women that they may go and nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go, and the maid went and called the child's mother. So the actual mother was there, and Jochebed. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take the child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee wages. So she's going to get paid for taking care of her own child. Take him with you, take him to your own house for a while, and there nurse for him as long as he needs nursing. And to mark that he is mine and not yours, to silence inquiry, to stop the mouths of informers, I will give thee wages. Jochebed was more than content. And one of the things that you see is that for her to do what she did when it's time to give Moses, up, it took great faith on her part to do that. That'd be something very difficult. And the woman took the child and nursed it, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. And so that's what Moses means, is drawn out, which I find very interesting, that everybody's name seems to mean something. And when the time came, probably at the end of the second year, for him to be weaned, she was bound, whatever the sufferings of her heart may have been, to give him up, to restore him to her from whom she had received him, as a child put out to nurse. And we see that she made no attempt to escape her obligations. Like I say, it had to have been very difficult. Note, Jochebed's tried and growing faith. The God that saw us at the riverbank will see us through. And you can imagine yourself with your own children, to imagine having to give up your child. But under the circumstances, you pretty much had to do what you had to do. And if you wanted him to survive, it had to have stung her very, very hard. And when he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. So Moses learned all the wisdom of the Egyptians, became a great man both in words and deeds. Philo, in his life of Moses, quoted by Whitby, says he was schooled in music, geometry, arithmetic, hieroglyphics, and the whole circle of arts and sciences. And I wanted to read this too. In the speech to the Jews, Stephen says that Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and that he was mighty in his words and works. The historian Josephus adds that Moses served as a general leading an army against the Ethiopians. I think that's going to come up here. Egypt was famous for her learning and wisdom. Her school system was highly developed. Sons of vassal kings came from as far away as the Euphrates River to study and to receive training in Egypt. From the records that have been found, it is impossible to have a good estimate of the curriculum Moses studied, but he would have been exposed to at that day and time, Egypt was, we look at our country today and we think, oh, we're on the top rung. Egypt would have been that way, on the top rung, if you will. We talked about them embalming and, things that, very, they were very skilled, very knowledgeable. And I know y'all seen the movie, I've probably seen the movie, The Ten Commandments. And I can't help but think about that when I think about Moses, that here he is, he's like a who's who, just doing all kinds of things, being a general, leading troops into battle, and tremendous amount of, just a wide range of knowledge and that kind of thing. So, which makes it interesting that the choices that he made down the road. Tradition tells of Moses as a great captain among the Egyptians, and is leading them to victory against the Ethiopians, as we mentioned. When Moses grew up, faith led him to refuse to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Evidence that his upbringing, his Hebrew heritage, were not hidden from him by family or enemies. And that's why I say, here you are. Now, if he was struggling, if he was like, life's just too difficult here, but it wasn't. The door's open for so many opportunities if he wanted that. But the fact that he grew up knowing his heritage and realizing, where he came from, I just find it amazing. I mean, you look at Abraham. When Abraham was called to go to Canaan, and leaving and just going out by faith, and you see that here. I think in Moses that. There's several things we could read about that as well. And I think, we got some time. All right. Before we get to that, I wanted to read Hebrews. Go to Hebrews chapter 11. There we go. I'll start in verse 24. By faith, Moses, and this is Hebrews 11. By faith, when Moses became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Let me pause there. Are you kidding me? Pharaoh's daughter? The stuff that would have been available to him? Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured seeing him who is invisible. And we want to touch on that verse right there, because there's another verse, says he didn't fear the king, and then when you read in Exodus, he fled because he feared the king. Let's go ahead and we'll read this. And in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren, and he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So going back to bodies can easily, I guess, go in the sand there in Egypt. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to them, or said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. So we're going to see where Moses is going to flee. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. And one of the things that we just read that, I wanted to read this quickly. Hebrews 11 tells us many great things in the role of faith in Moses' life. There was the faith of his parents who loved him and did not allow the king's command to stop them from doing what was right. By faith, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Instead, he took his stand with the Israelites, though the cost was very high. He literally cast away the treasures of Egypt. In return, he looked to God for suitable recompense. The Hebrew writer says that Moses fled Egypt not fearing the wrath of the king, and that's Hebrews 11:27. In Exodus 2:14, and we didn't read this verse, but if you read 2:14, however, the Bible says Moses feared and said, well, I guess we did read, I'm sorry, on the thing. Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. How can these two statements be reconciled? The Hebrew writer carefully observes the chronological order of events. Beginning with the Hebrews in 11:23, the writer refers to the act of Moses' parents when they hid him for 3 months next to Moses. Refusal to count himself an Egyptian, then his forsaking Egypt, unafraid of the king, next to keeping of the Passover, and finally the crossing of the Red Sea. This is precisely the order followed in the book of Exodus in Stephen's speech in Acts chapter 7. Therefore, the evidence in Hebrews 11 points more to the idea of his removal from the land of Midian after killing the Egyptian. One good explanation is found in the parallel between Moses' action and his parents' action. It is said of his parents that by faith they hid Moses for 3 months and were not afraid of the king's command. Obviously, they were afraid, or else they would have not. Why would they have hidden Moses and put forth the effort to provide a special ark to place among the bulrushes? The point is, they did not allow their fear of the king's command to deter them from saving their child, no matter what it took. Similarly, Moses feared punishment from the king after killing the man, as Exodus says, but he did not allow his fear of what might happen and did happen to deter him from taking the side of his people. And then he points out there's also another explanation as well. On the other hand, if the reference in 11:27 is to Moses' departure from Egypt when he led Israel forth, Moses' confrontations with Pharaoh came when he demanded that the king let the Israelites go. This was when he faced the king bravely, told him of the plagues that would come upon him, and finally led the people forth. Moses was afraid on that occasion also when God first told him he was what he was to do. And remember, that would be at the burning bush, and he had all kinds of excuses. But his fear did not stop his obedience to God. Ultimately, his fear did not stop him. And to me, what that says is you see people, you see real events, and yeah, there's fear involved. But what's stronger, my fear or my faith? And I think in Moses' case, I think his faith was stronger. And he stands out as a hero, as someone who, when it needed to be done, it got done. And the point to us, hopefully we take from that, is there may be fear. It's like, well, as a Christian, I may face some difficult situations. But I'm afraid of it. Well, what if, I'm human, and those are real feelings. But I trust God. Is my faith what it should be? And so when we read these stories and we see these kind of things, hopefully let's take that from that to see where, yeah, they had real obstacles. They had real things that could have held him back. And again, what amazes me, he could have just gone along with the crowd, and he, from an earthly standpoint, he would have been, a lot of people say, he'd been set, he had all kinds of stuff. But no, his faith and what he truly believed in was where he ultimately wound up, if you will, doing the right thing. And again, we're out of time, and so I didn't mean to get carried away with that. But I don't want us to lose sight of, we read these things, let's make a connection to them. Thank y'all for y'all's